Please join me in welcoming Tom and Chris.
Once upon a time, copper was king. It connected billions. And some thought it would last forever.
That was pretty cool. I always typically follow a marketing guy whenever I speak, and they have these really cool sizzle reels. So we went back to the people in the business and we said, you have to do something for us, because if we're supposed to entertain a whole room full of people and we don't have some fancy stuff going on, we're going to fall on our asses. So anyway.
So that was fancy.
Yeah. Anyway, so today we're going to talk about wireline evolution. Before we get into it, I really want to thank Sharon and the folks at OSP for inviting us to speak. Interestingly, I think it was about a year or so ago that they approached me when we were down in Dallas and asked if I was interested in doing the keynote. And at the time, Chris and I were actually both down there talking about some different subjects. And I thought it'd be entertaining, or at least interesting, to hear from the both of us. If you read the magazine article or saw the cover, you could realize that I had a beard at the time. He did not. We get to share a beard amongst the two of us. It's his turn. As a side note, I didn't realize how dark his hair was. At one point, I didn't even realize he had hair, but that's another story.
Hair's overrated.
Huh? Overrated?
Hair's overrated.
Luxurious locks. So anyway, I'd like to thank Sharon because she mentioned a couple of things earlier on that I want to touch upon. And I think Chris and I both agreed. We talked to this prior to coming here today. And if we reflected back on some of the things that we've been able to accomplish in the business, we attribute all of that to a couple of key critical factors. And I think education is one of them. Being exposed to new products and network elements is another one. And the last one, perhaps the most important, is the ability to talk to people who are infinitely smarter than we are. And so I think you guys would all agree that OSP helps us to not only achieve, but beat those particular critical factors by enabling us to come out and share ideas with each other and experience some of the new products that are out there. So Sharon, I thank you guys for helping us out there.
And I echo on top of that. When I think about, we just celebrated the first decade of our FiOS experience in Verizon. And I think about the last 10 years, and I think about lots of people in this room in the vendor community, and where we were 10 years ago when we got started with that massive effort, and where we are today, and how we have literally reinvented almost everything that we do in that aspect collectively with Verizon and with the vendor community. It's really been an amazing experience over the last decade. And as our chairman tells us all the time, there is always a higher gear, there is always more to do, there is always improvements to be made. So that challenge goes on to us, and a challenge goes out to this room as well, that we have to just continue to look forward for innovation and opportunity and collectively working together. So,
very good. All right, today we're going to touch upon a couple of different things. First, I thought it was important to go through a quick history lesson. In the article, I referenced George Santayana, who said, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. So today I'm not going to quote him again. I'll quote Confucius, who says that study the past if you would define the future. So I think it's important to kind of understand where we've come from to realize where it is that we want to be. Then we'll go into a little bit of why we need wireline evolution, which is a collective name for a few different things that we're working on. Then we'll talk about what it is and where do we go from here. So anyway, getting into the quick history of telecom. Back in the 1870s is when it all began. Now, for some reason, I got to do the older portion of it, and I don't think it's because Chris believes I was actually there. But anyway, a guy by the name of Innocenzo Manzetti in 1844 actually came up with the whole concept of the telephone. And a lot of people attribute the creation of this to him. It's a couple of years later, about a decade or so later, a guy by the name of Antonio Meucci actually invented something called a teletrophono. And interestingly, he didn't have the wherewithal or perhaps the funds, I think it was about $10, to apply for a patent. And so his ideas were kind of left unprotected. And in 1876, Alexander Graham Bell actually went out and patented his device, which was known as an apparatus for transmitting vocal or other sounds telegraphically. Now, Bell's patent stood in existence till about 1893, at which point it expired, and there was an infusion of thousands of telephone companies into the marketplace, which kind of reminds me of the late 90s, too. As a matter of fact, some of the companies...
History repeating itself.
Exactly. So, but I think some of the companies that existed back in Bell's days are still in existence. I can't make the same claim for some of the other guys. But anyway, so all of this kind of stayed in place until 1913, when a guy by the name of Nathan Kingsbury from AT&T struck something, an agreement that actually created AT&T, as we all knew and loved it way back when. Things stayed pretty quiet in the industry until 1934, which was the creation of the original Telecom Act. Now, the reason I think it's important to mention this is because even today, when Chris and I go out and talk to certain groups about what it is that we're trying to do, people still hold us to the tenets of the 1934 Telecom Act. And basically, they look at things like service reliability, consumer protection, public safety, are a couple of the key elements in there. We could talk a little bit about that. So now we'll move into the more modern times. I'll hand it off to Chris.
Yeah, so we step forward a few decades into the 70s, into the 80s and 90s, and from the 34 Telecom Act, baseline infrastructure, and you just think about the construct of the marketplace in the United States from the Bell system and the major independent carriers, not a lot changes. Not a lot really changes, both in innovation of the baseline infrastructure. I mean, you begin to see some movement to data concentrated networks, but largely just for long haul situations and for large enterprise use. But generally in the local access network and the residential use, not a lot has changes. But a huge thing happens in the early 70s when the first commercial wireless call gets made. And you fast forward 40 years to the date of that anniversary, and we now have more smartphones than we have a populace in the United States. So the last few decades, as we'll touch upon, have really been a lot more transformative than we saw in the first few decades of the turn of the century. The 80s come, and we have the breakup of the Bell system. You fast forward on top of that to the 1996 Act, and again, history repeats itself when you have a totally different model and all kinds of new entrants come into the marketplace. We fast forward from there, as we just talked about, to the last decade, what Verizon has been focused on in reinventing itself to remain competitive both in the wireline market, but as well as launching and being one of the leaders in the wireless evolution. We see, again, rapid movement, rapid change, constant change going on throughout the industry, throughout the marketplace, and the necessity to keep pace with that, the great necessity to keep pace, because as we'll talk through here, while there's also all kinds of new entrants coming into the marketplace, the Wall Street story is also littered with companies that fall out of the marketplace and aren't able to keep pace and to keep change, because it's just a tremendous challenge as we move forward. We fast forward 2005 into the early 2000s, the cable operators start to come into our business for both voice and data. We begin to go into their business in launching video. And what really comes out of the benefit of that is for consumers, because competition ramps up for these services in the local access area. You think about today in the speeds that we talk about to homes and the functionality that we bring to homes in the marketplace. Without competition, none of that happens. None of that happens. You don't see the necessity or the financial drive for the innovation. It's only competition that brings it. And fast forward to 2011 in the wireless industry, you see the expansion away from just simple phones to make voice calls to data concentrated devices, and everyone is walking around with multiple devices and plus 10 devices in any individual household, and the capacity and challenge of running the wireless network continues to grow.
Okay, so that's the telecom world. So now we'll go through a little quick history of us. Sharon shared some of the things that we've done as of late, but our history with the company goes way, way back. As a matter of fact, it goes back to the 50s when my father was hired in the company. That's actually a picture of my father that I found in a box of AT&T archive photos. For those of you who are pretty astute watching the opening video, you'll notice that there was a lashing machine in the video, and I think it actually is the same lashing machine that you see here that my father is working on. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today. He started in the business. He couldn't be here because he's not here anymore. But he started in the business and worked his way up to where he was a director in labor with AT&T up to the point of a divestiture. And then he retired, and then he came back to work for NYNEX at the time. And after a total of 51 years in the business, he retired in 2007. Chris, your father started around the same time?
Yeah, my father started in the early 1960s at New York Telephone in the Bronx, and I was looking for an equal resolution picture to match Tom's dad there, but I couldn't find one, so I brought the real thing. Dad, you want to stand up? Now I have to do a good job.
Huh?
I have to do a good job today.
Okay.
Make me look good.
I'm trying my best. So I could only do so much. So in the 1980, no, I'm keeping the damn clicker. So in the, he who has the clicker wins. So we jump ahead to the 1980s. I started in the business. It says in the magazine I was an engineer, but I don't want to insult any engineers. I was actually a draftsman working in engineering, and my job at the time was to take these cable plats, which were, I think they were written on papyrus or something, and then convert them over to vellum. And so I spent my days writing I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I thought it was pretty interesting, and the pictures were really nice. But today, if you want to go and look at any of the cable plats in Queens, I might have had a hand in doing things. So
Bill Bragg, now we know where our records are bad, right?
So anyway, but then I went on to work in the I&M organization, and I spent my early years working to what I considered to be the original unbundling of the network. I converted a lot of hardwired phones to modular, so people could now do cool things like get long handle cords. If they really had a yearning for a Mickey Mouse phone, they could go out and get one of those. Because I know you started I was an outer borough guy. You were more of a New York City guy.
I started in 1989 in Harlem. I worked early part of my career in construction. I was a cable splicer, calling in and out of manholes and basements. When I came into the company, I was one of the last few classes that actually still had to go to lead wiping school. So we talk, as far into 1989 and into the 90s, we're still training technicians to deal with lead cable. We still have plenty of it out there as well. Fast forward a number of years, different operation engineering jobs. I had a fantastic opportunity at a time where I was running engineering for the city of New York and got to sit and contemplate what it would be like to rewire all of New York City with fiber optics and work with a lot of people in this room. And fast forward a few more years and we're standing here talking
hanging out here. So anyway, the one constant, despite all these different changes in the industry as we moved along, was, where's my chart? That's me.
Copper.
There you go.
Constant copper.
Now, copper is not inherently bad. It's a good conductive material. The issue is that there have been a couple of things in the industry as of late that have impacted copper. And so there's actually two things that come into mind. And it's because of these two issues that we really feel that we need a wireline evolution program. So the big question, first issue I want to deal with is copper utilization has been declining. And so I did a study a little while ago, and I looked at the number of copper access lines in Verizon footprint since the inception of Verizon, or the birth of Verizon in 2000. And over the first 12 years, and that loss has continued to this day, but over the first 12 years, we lost 35.6 million access lines. That's about 68% of our customer base. Now, I struggle to think of a company that lost 68% of a customer base and continued to survive, let alone thrive. And I think it's because some of the decisions we made and strategic moves that we took over the course of the last decade or so that have allowed us to get to where we are today. Now, the thing is, the problem here is the population of the United States is not shrinking at the same time. So the question is, where are all these people going? And so they are going here. And if you look at some of the options that are open to the customers today, you can see that there are wireless companies, there are VoIP providers, there are MSOs, There's a device manufacturer. There's some CLECs in there. The thing that I draw out on the right side of the page that I think is pretty interesting is that there are a couple of folks out there competing with us that I would never have thought to be a competitor when I started in the business, and the top one is Walmart. And I'm sure you guys have seen the commercials that Walmart has had out there. This is their Basic Talk, I think this is their Straight Talk product. There's a Basic Talk product out there as well. And Walmart is a pretty formidable competitor. Like them or not, people buy the stuff that they see in Walmart. So it's kind of interesting that we could lose a significant portion of our market share to Walmart. The other entity I mentioned up there is the AARP. And the AARP, the reason I mention them is because I think it's kind of interesting. They've been pretty vocal in terms of what we're doing with wireline evolution, but they have a very strong partnership with Consumer Cellular, who is, in fact, has a wireless home phone product. And so it kind of shows how complicated the whole situation gets when you talk about who's involved in the marketplace these days. But let's look at this from a neighborhood perspective. So throughout the discussion, Chris and I will talk about our neighborhood. This is the neighborhood that we live in. In this particular picture, these are single-family units. They could be multiple dwelling units. You see our nifty little central office, and a dashed line represents a copper infrastructure. If you look at what's happening in the neighborhood today, about 30% of the people have cut the cord. And that means they're gone. They went to somebody else. They're doing complete wireline bypass. If you look at the rest of the neighborhood, you find out about 60% of the people are bundling services. Now, if we have fiber in the neighborhood, we have a good chunk of those people that are bundling. If we don't, they're going with an MSO. Now, just in the spirit of full disclosure, the 40% is actually probably north of, the 30% is actually probably north of 40% these days. But that would screw up my math and the really cool pictures I have, so I left it at 30%. So at the end of the day, what you see here is about 10% of the people who can get service off of copper continue to do so on a company basis. And that's where we get into a little bit of inefficiency because we're maintaining, if we happen to have fiber in the neighborhood, we're maintaining two networks. And that's both inefficient and not very practical.
Yeah, and it's, you think about Tom's slide before, you show the loss of customers, and then this is just a sort of a 1 out of 10 example of what's going on there. And so running two networks, where we've built parallel networks, just becomes every passing day becomes more and more inefficient because, as many of you know, there's a fixed cost to each part of that network. And the erosion of the service, eliminates some of the costs, but it certainly doesn't eliminate all of the fixed costs. And it makes it very challenging and very difficult for us to remain an efficient business as we move forward.
Now, the other issue with copper that's been around for a while, it's that it's fragile. And when I hear the word fragile, I think of Chris, so I let you take this part of it.
Yeah, in the dictionary, fragile is a picture of me, fragile. So when we think about copper and the challenges for what we do and the challenges that we have in the scenarios here is, basic high school science. Copper is a very good conductor. We know water to be a good conductor, but the two things together don't make a good situation, as our storm clouds show, and make a very challenging service experience as we go through. It's why you don't take a bath with a toaster. It's just not a good combination. You're going to bring the lightning bolts where you don't want them. And we can't stop the water from coming. We want the water to come, but we certainly don't want to be constantly maintaining a network that looks like the pictures that we have here. Now, some folks think about this story and suggest, well, the reason these things happen is that you're pouring capital funds into fiber and you're not spending it on copper. Well, take a look at this picture. I mean, these copper cables, as you can see by their design, they're not that old. And the cable and the customers that are served in these scenarios, there were copper cables that preceded these cables. In fact, I probably put them there. And you see the deterioration that happens over just a short few decades and sometimes in a faster scenario. So you'd be constantly going out every few decades and upgrading this infrastructure. And actually, that's the wrong word. You'd be replacing the infrastructure, but you're not upgrading it. You're really only getting some incremental benefit from the new infrastructure, but it's not a platform for us to be able to leverage the type of services that our customers are demanding today. So we've got to move forward. We've got to move forward from here.
The big question then becomes, realizing all of this, how can we best serve today's customers without sacrificing the future? The answer is wireline evolution. So the big question is, what is wireline evolution? Well, wireline, I put this chart together. It was interesting. I'd go off on a tangent here a little bit. I've had many a conversation with regulators, and I'm amazed at how often I get into a discussion with people and I talk about some of the things we're trying to do. And they think it's an attempt for us to, like, play some sort of shell game and get everybody to pay more on Fios, and that's not really the case. Wireline evolution is just a way for us to leverage the existing newer technology that we have in place to deliver better reliability, maintain customer cost, because we're not raising their rates and we're not charging them to move over to the better platform. We're positioning our network for the future, because the thing that's very interesting is, as I've looked through a lot of this wireline evolution stuff, I realized that it's not just about telecom. There's also a sociological aspect to this, because the people who happen to stay on copper today are the ones who like it because that's where they've always been. So, we need to make sure that we just don't dwell on that, because the future customers' needs are much different from the former customers' needs, and we need to be mindful of that as we position our network for the future. The other thing from a company perspective that's good is that we're looking to eliminate unnecessary operational expense, some of the inefficiencies that Chris talked about a couple of seconds ago. Now, what wireline evolution isn't.
So what wireline evolution is not for us, the first thing is this is not a seminal moment for us in the movement to all IP. Now that is on its own logical path, that is occurring, that will occur, but our main focus is movement from copper to fiber. Our main focus is not running parallel networks where we don't need to. We want to be a more efficient business. We want to be a simpler business, both internally but externally to our customers and our partners. And moving forward to a single access network platform will make us just that. We will be a more efficient business, we will be a simpler business, and that impact will be felt by our customers. And as Tom said, this is, again, not a way for us to drive revenue. This is actually a way for us to eliminate cost. It is not a movement to be anti-competitive. We understand the workings of the wholesale marketplace today, and we are contemplating the support of the wholesale market as we move into the future. And it's also not a complete statement of the end of copper, because there are certainly many areas of our wireline network where the economics of fiber to the home are still upside down. But where we have made those investments, it is a necessity to get to a single access platform, at least on the physical network, and again, derive the efficiencies from that.
Just to hit on the IP transition piece, when we first started working on this, I went down to DC and I talked to the FCC. And it was kind of confusing to a lot of people to figure out, they would say, okay, what are you guys doing? And we explained what we were doing. And they said, well, but there are other people that are doing other things. And I said, yes, as Chris's point, those things are going to happen. But right now, we're focused on the outside plant piece of the world. That's where our attention needs to be focused. So anyway, looking at this from back to our neighborhood perspective, the question of focus becomes, well, it's kind of expensive to move people over to a fiber platform, especially if you're not pulling additional revenue out of them. So the question then becomes, who do we migrate over to get the biggest bang for the buck? And we started doing a little bit of analysis, and we found out that 10% of our copper customers were generating 70% of our dispatches. Now, from a customer perspective, that's just pretty lousy service. And from an operational perspective, we're spending a boatload of money to take care of customers that, they're not, this isn't a big revenue base of customers, in the sense that each one of them is giving us hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So what we've done is we come up with a process where we can identify that individual customer, and we do so by tagging. We know their trouble history, we know their serving terminal. We look to find out the closest serving spot to that customer and said, okay, based on that terminal, we're going to tag this customer, because when they come to us on a reactive basis, we'll be able to offer them a migration to fiber, but we could also go after them proactively. And so our process is pretty straightforward. We dispatch a technician to the house. The picture on the left represents the copper-fed home. The fiber-fed home is on the right. We just disconnect the service wire from the serving terminal to the home, install an ONT, complete the fiber connection, and the customer is turned up and their services are working. Same service they had before, same regulation they've had before. This isn't a VoIP product, it's a regular TDM product. And so to date, we have over 700,000 customers that we feel are getting better service, which is pretty significant. We started this program on December 18th of 2011. And we've been, we've been accelerating it ever since. So anyway, a lot of questions popped up in the wake of Sandy, and people started asking, okay, what are you going to do about battery backup? Now, I had a lot of conversations with customers about battery backup, and I realized that customers fell into 3 different buckets. There were people that thought the 8-hour battery backup that we had at the time was perfectly adequate. There were other people who thought it was inadequate. And then there was a large group of people who didn't give a damn either way. And the reason for that is because they had alternative products available to them. But realizing, in cases that we had to address the needs of customers because we're moving them to a new service, we went out and developed something we call Power Reserve. I talked to one of the engineers in our business, and they said Power Reserve is the dumbest piece of technology in our network. But it's very popular. It's simply a little unit. I think it's an engineering marvel, actually. But it's a unit that runs on D-cell batteries, and it plugs into a power adapter, which is powering up the ONT. The thing that's nice about this, it has a little rocker switch on the bottom of it, and these D-cell batteries will keep an ONT up and running for 18 to 20 hours of talk time. And the thing that's nice about the rocker switch is that if the batteries start to die, you could actually toggle the rocker switch and get an additional hour of talk time. But in the event that you don't have an extra set of D-cell batteries, you could always just power it down and power it back up when you need it.
So with this, we have put forward the most robust battery backup example that's available in the marketplace today, and the customer is in control of how it works. And if they're in an elongated power failure, they're just simply changing batteries and their voice service continues to work.
Which is important. I think the customer managed aspect is critical because, I don't think it's possible for us to predict how much battery backup an individual customer needs, nor do I think it's possible for a regulatory body to predict that as well. I think enabling the customer to make that decision themselves is pretty significant. Now, interestingly, we made a decision towards the end of last year after we commissioned a couple of studies and did a lot of trials where we offered battery backup for sale to new customers. And as opposed to just giving it away for free, because we were giving battery backup away for free for people who didn't even have voice service. They had a video data double play or data only. And so the thing that's interesting is that since we launched this program nationally at the end of last year, about well over 90% of the customers have opted not to purchase a battery backup unit, which I think is pretty telling, and it's also pretty indicative of other communications devices customers rely on. So anyway, where are we today? As I mentioned, we have over 700,000 fiber migrations completed. I think we're going to hit about 1 million sometime in the beginning of next year. We feel conservatively that 700,000 migrations has saved the company about 1 million dispatches. And a typical chronic customer, or a customer that's had chronic copper issues, has about 2.7 dispatches per year. So that's how we kind of worked on some of this math. But that's pretty significant when you consider the cost of a truck roll.
So moving these customers to a parallel fiber network that's just sitting right outside their house has enabled the opportunity for over 1 million times our customers have not had to take time off from work, disrupt their lives to sit home to wait to have their voice line fixed.
Yep. If you look at it from a dispatch rate perspective, the before picture is something north of a 10, and the after picture is just around a little bit north of a 2. And so you can see the dispatch rate has dropped significantly. Now, as an added benefit, we realize that once customers get on the fiber platform, this is kind of an unintended consequence, but once customers get on the fiber platform and they realize how stable it is, they'll call us up and they'll actually buy more products and services from us. So we've actually seen an uptick in average revenue per customer based on the migration efforts as well, which is pretty cool.
Tom, just plant to plant, where we've built parallel fiber, when we just talk about plant maintenance issues on fiber and general plant maintenance issues on copper, what have we seen over the last decade?
The outside plant trouble rates for fiber are about 80% better than those of copper.
So
okay. But the problem is, and I think everybody will unilaterally agree, that fiber's great, but what happens in a copper-only area?
Yeah, so what happens in a copper-only area, as we keep going back to the neighborhood, because we want to take this conversation local, is, as we said, in many parts of our wireline areas, the economics of fiber to the home are still upside down. But so where copper exists and we don't have parallel fiber, we'll continue to maintain that copper. But we also have the opportunity that we have the best wireless network in the country. So we have the opportunity, as customers go through and experience wireline copper issues, that we can avail them of wireless fixed devices that we've utilized over the last couple of years to restore their service more rapidly than we would have in certain copper dispatch issues. And with that, we've deployed a fixed wireless device called VoiceLink to help in supporting this. So what is our Verizon VoiceLink? We'll talk about what it is. Tom will tell you what it's not. But it's what we've utilized this VoiceLink device for is for voice-only customers. So this is not a device that we use for voice and data devices. As we said, it's looked to be a quick restoral and support of voice services, and it's worked out very well for us. It's a proven and reliable technology. It is relying on the Verizon wireless network. And with our technicians, as we'll show you through, performing the installation at in the best opportunity location, and then putting the battery backup situation, which is even simpler than what we have on the Fios ONT battery backup, we put that reliability in the hands of our customers. Now, so what is it not?
VoiceLink is not designed to replace all copper. A lot of people thought that when we rolled this out that this was the end of copper. Again, it's like anytime we roll something new out, everybody thinks it's the end of copper. This is not the case. It is as Chris pointed out, it's for a very specific set of customers. They have to have a chronic trouble history, and they also have to have voice-only services. There are other limitations associated with VoiceLink as far as alarm circuits go and medical monitoring. Those customers are excluded. When we go through the vetting process up front, when we talk to the customer, we exclude those folks. But when the tech goes back out to the customer's house to install the device, they'll do a final look-see, because it's amazing how many people, when you ask them if they have something, they say no, but when you get to the house, you find out that they actually do. Maybe they forgot.
Now, one important aspect on the is side of what these devices do in supporting voice is they have full E911 capability. So even though it's a wireless device, it's a fixed wireless device, and the location of that customer will work the same way as their fixed wireline scenario. So this is supported in emergency situations.
Yep. So the other thing, VoiceLink is not more expensive. We have a couple of different plans associated with VoiceLink. A VoiceLink customer remains a customer of Verizon Wireline, even though we're using the wireless service. And the reason for that is we wanted to keep the notion of sameness in place, because a lot of these customers like things the way they were. So VoiceLink was created and designed such that our techs can go into the customer's house, install the device, and the customer really wouldn't know that anything had changed. The one upside that I want to point out here is, in terms of cost to the customer, is that people on VoiceLink have unlimited local and long distance service, whereas a lot of our copper customers are limited to just local or measure rate services. So in many instances, the customer is getting more services for the same amount of money. The other thing is VoiceLink was not developed in a vacuum. Chris and I have spent a lot of time on the road talking to different regulatory bodies, and I remember there was a week I spent in DC. I think I spoke to 62 unique customer advocacy groups describing specifically what VoiceLink can and cannot do, and assuring them if they have any questions, we'll look to address those. So anyway, that's what VoiceLink looks like.
So a quick look at VoiceLink, pretty simple device. Voicemail indicator, battery indicator, the signal strength. As said, our technicians, as they deploy these devices, look for the best signal opportunity within a home as to where they affix the device. Simple antenna and power button, and the power and two line ports. So pretty straightforward, simple device.
So the power button is pretty significant too, because the battery backup, which you can't see on the back side of the unit, is actually 3 AA batteries. And those 3 AA batteries will keep the unit running for 72 hours, which I think is the longest that anybody has out there in terms of battery backup with a telecom device. Again, if you need to replace the batteries because the service is dying, all you have to do is pop a new set in there, or you can turn the unit off and conserve batteries for the future. Now, you'll notice that there are 2 line ports on the side, or RJ11s, and the reason for that deals with the installation process.
So in the installation process, and we've deployed over 20,000 of these devices thus far. Again, it's placement by Verizon technicians to where the best signal strength will be within the home, a separation of the inside wire of the house from the outside plant wire, and customers, back in service.
Yep. If a tech goes out to the customer's house and they're not pulling 2 bars, they won't install the device. I mean, that's our instruction, because the goal of VoiceLink is to give the customer better service than they have on copper. We're not deploying this to get them into another medium and give them equally crappy service that they had before, because that makes absolutely no sense. So anyway, we have about 20,000 customers on VoiceLink. Just over 10,000 of those customers are on a permanent basis. The other batch of customers are actually people who are on VoiceLink on a temporary basis. Whereas Chris mentioned earlier, if we have a cable failure or something else that impacts the customer service in a particular area, we can give VoiceLink units to their houses and get them restored in a matter of hours. There was one example down here in the Potomac area not too long ago where some dude drove his SUV over our CEV and it was all screwed up. And so while we're looking for the pieces necessary to repair the damage, I think we had technicians run out and install 58 VoiceLink units and got the customers running, I think, within a 2-hour time frame.
Right.
And once everything was all settled in the CEV, then we could go out and move them back over again. So I think this is a pretty good solution for a good set of customers. But the question is, we have a good fiber program, we have a good wireless program. Where do we go from here? Now, the stuff that we've been talking about up until this point falls into a program that we called Network Evolution. And you can see we have some of the terms there like tagging. I mentioned tagging, which is the process of identifying the individuals in the neighborhood. We have FITOS, F, which is fiber is the only fix. And in certain jurisdictions, we've actually taken the step to say, you know what, if your copper service breaks, we're only going to put you back on fiber. X-toggling is going to a particular cross box and effectively shutting down the assignment of copper facilities in that cross box where we have duplicate facilities or parallel facilities. So if a new customer moves into the neighborhood, they will only have the ability to buy fiber-based services. TPCA is transport pair change automation. These are the guys on my team. They could never come up with an easy name for something. So transport pair change automation is when a customer calls 611, or geez, I'm dating myself. When they call technical support, they can, they'll just have a normal conversation that they would have in the past with the representative, and then all of the ordering that's necessary to convert the customer to fiber will happen behind the scenes. Now, interestingly, when we started this program, we used to route all of the people who had chronic trouble history into our sales center so they could have a conversation with a rep, because we thought the rep having a nice, pleasant conversation with the customer would help allay any fears they have about migrating over. But then we realized that these folks didn't trust the rep because they were too nice. They were used to calling up saying, my phone sucks, send the guy out, tell him to fix it. And so the conversations that took place—
Sucks being a technical term.
A technical term. But we found out that the customers were so used to the process of calling our repair bureau and having a technician go out there, what we decided to do was eliminate that upfront discussion and empower the technician to have that conversation with the customer, and it turned out to work much better. Other things, proactive migration, CMB is consumer and mass business. Everybody knows what legal and regulatory is. But these are the things that we kind of dealt with in a network evolution program. And our program was rather scattered in that it was specific to a customer in a particular area based on that customer's trouble history. We targeted the high-cost circuits, and we had no additional fiber build-out. So this is leveraging the investment that we have in place today. Now, that's kind of the stuff that I was working on. And then, I guess about a year or so ago, we started working on something known as network transformation.
So with network transformation, we've, as Tom just said, we've launched a new program and a new focus as we've come into 2014. And where network evolution and network transformation come together is they come together in focusing on service, on providing the best service for our customers, and being able, as we've said, to leverage the best use of technologies to support our customer service as we go forward. Where the two things differ is in the execution and actually the full program, and actually what is part of the goals in the execution here. And with transformation, we are looking to move all services. Thus far, the Network Evolution program is focused on consumer voice services, and where we have customers that just remain on copper with voice services, we have worked to move them over to fiber. But with transformation, we are looking to move all customer service, both voice and data, from the consumer customer through the small business customer, right up to the enterprise customers, all over to fiber-based access infrastructure, and to do it in a concentrated geography. So in our world, our geographies are defined by wire centers or central office boundaries. So this program is focused on identifying areas and central offices that are ripe for this transition and this movement. And we've begun a dialogue with all of our customers, again, from the consumer right up through the enterprise, to make this transition from copper to fiber. And it's, again, all circuits where it's been necessary to actually build out more fiber to flesh in the network, where in a central office area we've not necessarily had full parallel fiber to our copper access network. We are building out to complete that end state to be able to reach where all of our existing customers are. And at some point in time in the conversation, it's all or none. We don't, again, go back to the point of the inefficiencies and the erosion on the existing legacy network. If we don't move all the customers over and switch off the legacy infrastructure, then we can't pull out all of the fixed operational costs that are still there. I mean, just think about it from an environmental perspective. We are drawing the power to run multiple networks when the necessity to do that is not there. So our power consumption, from the aggregation point of a central office, will be reduced dramatically as we move forward and we retire the massive Class 5 switch footprint that we have throughout our wireline area.
Now, I'm going to let Chris cover this chart, but I do want to make one little point. The program, the network transformation program, is now, we'll talk a bit where we're actually running this today in 2014. We're not going to get into the plans for 2015 because we're still working through some of those. But the one point I wanted to make is that we're not doing network transformation in all of our serving areas. And the reason for that is because we do have some regulatory constraints that prohibit us from moving people over and just saying, no, you're going to take fiber and that's it. And so that's one of the things that we constantly work through. So I just wanted to highlight that one.
So with pointing out regulatory constraints, it's just the point here is there are rules of the road. You can retire access infrastructure, and there's a process with the FCC, and there are processes in some cases at a state level that you have to go through in this transformation. So we're working through that process, and we're working on the path that exists today as we go forward. There's operational costs for making this transformation, so to be able to pull the costs out, there is money that has to be invested and spent. There's going to continue to be the need for evolution of technologies. I would not suggest at any point that we've got all the problems solved about how to do this and make this transition more efficient. So there's a lot of opportunity for improvement as we go forward. We've been learning lots of things through the experience of the Network Evolution Program and the migration. We've learned a lot of things through the post-Hurricane Sandy effort. And as we begin this transformation, there's a lot of learnings that we'll take forward, but need to work with the vendor community to be able to drive this forward fast and efficiently. And lastly is the customer impact. But lastly, but not in priority order, this is going to provide not only the quality of service benefit for our customers, but it gets them on a better future-proof platform for the evolution of their services as we move forward. So the 2014 plan, as you can see in big bold stars, we're concentrated on 6 wire centers across 5 states. There's 2 million feet of access copper in those 6 areas. Bell Harbor, New York, which is a central office in the borough of Queens in New York City, that has already been transferred over. It is now a completely fiber optic access area. Ocean View, Virginia, I haven't checked my email, but it also, as of today, if not tomorrow, will actually be a completely all fiber optic access area network for Verizon. And then Farmingdale, Hummelstown, Orchard Park, and Linfield later on this year will all get to that end state. And then as I pointed out, at least 5 of these, the 6 switches that support service there will be powered down and shut off later on this year. So the Con Edison and other power companies won't be getting the same cash payment from us that they get every month, and that's a good thing.
Which allows us to reinvest in other places.
Absolutely. So
All right.
about 7,000 circuits of all different types working on the copper access network throughout these 6, again, are in the process of being all converted over to fiber optics.
So anyway, in closing, if we're looking ahead to what we're going to do at Verizon, well, we're going to continue to migrate customers with chronic issues because we think it's the right thing to do. And we realize there's a big education process involved. We're working carefully with customers. We know that there are bumps in the road. There are some people, quite frankly, when we say that we want to migrate them to Fios, we're a victim of our own advertising. They hear, when we might migrate them to fiber, they hear Fios, and they think that their $30 or $40 a month bill is going to be jacked up to $89, and that scares some people. So we're working with them to try to better educate customers, to better educate the stakeholders that we have involved in this, but we really believe it's the right thing to do to get people on a more stable platform.
Yeah, and the capping of legacy services, and again, it goes back to the complexity of products. As many of you know, we've got a lot of traditional DS0 class data services working on our legacy network. Some of those things will carry forward into an all-fiber world. Many of those things will not. And this transformation opportunity has actually been a good opportunity in conversations largely with our small, medium, and large business customers for them to reconcile what their service situation is with us. So in some cases, we've had customers downsize some of their voice and data usage with us. Some have expanded. But it's been an opportunity for the two of us together to kind of confront where we are together as a carrier company and where our customers are with their uses, and it's prodding both of us, to move forward and realize that there's a need for this evolution as we go forward.
Okay, last piece, the plant retirement stuff. But anyway, let's talk about what our network is going to look like. You can see, I think a lot of people are kind of taken aback when we show this picture, but you can see that our global network is going to be connected to our customers either through a wireless means, a fiber, or even copper. And I think people are taken aback by the fact that we still have copper. I've been into I've had a bunch of conversations with people that say, well, didn't your chairman say you're going to kill the copper? And they're referencing a conversation he had at a Guggenheim conference going back, I think, 2 years ago. And the full quote, if you go and read it, said, where we have fiber, we're going to take advantage of fiber, and where we have wireless, and we're going to take advantage of wireless and do away with the copper in those areas. And that will allow us to focus our resources on copper where we don't have another alternative. And a lot of people forget that last part of the quote, but it's there. You can go look. So, but anyway, at least for quite some time, we're going to have at least 3 different mediums out there. And our goal is to use the best one to provide the best service to our customers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I think we have a little bit of time. They're not going anywhere. Get over there. I think we have a little bit of time for Q&A.
Yes, and you will see mic runners coming through the aisles. Please raise your hand if you have a question for Tom and Chris.
And we're also doing a drawing later,
yes.
Right?
You have
So
to be present
I
to
will
win.
be picking somebody's ticket out of the but you have to be here to win. So if you're not here, well, you don't know what I'm saying, so it doesn't matter. So
Stick around. One mic here, another over there. Anyone has
can we bring up the
question?
house lights?
Hello. When you retire the copper in a community, do you get to take it down and scrap it?
Yes. Yeah. Where it's practical to do so, I think our last bullet point is where it's practical to remove the copper and salvage, absolutely. So there's a lot of value there. Just take example for this year's, I don't know what the equal tonnage of 2 million feet of copper cable is, but it's a lot.
In some cases, we do have the fiber lash for the copper, and we're evaluating whether or not it makes sense.
Yeah, that
to
lashing machine is important. So we'll be lashing and unlashing a lot of things as we go forward. So.
Yes, sir.
On your battery backup, you stated that some said we needed 4 hours, some more than 8 hours.
Yep.
Regulations, we always estimated or assumed that we had a regulation of 8 hours we had to.
Yeah, you're talking about NFPA?
Yes.
Yeah. It says, not to get into the whole the NFPA discussion, but I mean, we've been looking at that too, and it said that you have to provide 8 hours of battery, but the thing is, if a customer doesn't want it, they don't have If they don't have, well, first, how many customers have an alarm service? We have to look at that as well. So that's one of the things we're focusing on, customers with alarm services, what are the requirements in there, and what do we need to do to make sure that we have that. But Power Reserve provides well more than 8 hours of battery backup.
One good timing issue during Hurricane Sandy had to do with battery backup and the New York City Fire Department.
Yep.
We were actually already deep in conversations with them about battery backups for alarm systems throughout the city. And we actually came to a conclusion with them shortly after Sandy about the use. There's certainly recognized by the New York City Fire Department the necessity for evolution to better quality networks because they look at it the way we do. You need to look at this holistically, is you want that network to work as well as it can 365 days a year through all the seasonal aspects, not just focus on incidents of commercial power failure. You know, you want it to be working every day, 24/7 as good. And the best way to do that is through a combination of fiber optic networks or wireless technology. So they were very supportive of this movement, and it was helpful to us because in a lot of storm damaged areas where we had to move everything to fiber optics, we had a lot of our customers, both small and large, looking to restore service to their buildings, get everybody back to work, and a lot of the concerns were putting those alarms back on as people began to repopulate buildings.
But the intent of Power Reserve is to go more than 8.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
We have one right over there.
First of all, thank you so much. This has been very useful, educational.
You're welcome.
2 questions. One, the network transformation program, copper to fiber, is one option, and you said wireless is the other option. From an ROI perspective, which is cheaper? I mean, obviously we want to retain the customers, but is it coming at cost, over cost? How is it panning out?
Yeah, well,
It's an interesting question because, I mean, from a cost perspective, the cost to connect, VoiceLink is cheaper. I think VoiceLink is probably 1/10 of the cost to get somebody moved over to the fiber network. But VoiceLink can only do so much. And so, you know, if you have medical monitoring, and you know, remember the customer base that we're looking at here. A lot of these folks have medical monitoring. A lot of them have the alarm systems in place. You can't use VoiceLink. So we have to go. So it's, you know, it's not the decision to, well, one of the decisions we made early on is that if we have fiber in a particular area, we're going with fiber. And we're not going to, there's one exception around the country, we won't even get into that, but for the most part, we don't offer VoiceLink services in a fiber-enabled area.
Yeah, and I mean, so Tom talked about the capability. So there's a limit to capability of devices and what customer service match use is going to be. But it's also managing networks. So there's the balance of the capacity of the networks as you look to shift things. So having the fiber access network there also, you know, gives us the opportunity to be managing traffic in that way and not challenging the managing of wireless traffic as we go forward as well. So it's a balance between the two things.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So second question, it may be out of context here. If it is, I'll sit down and shut up.
I forgot to announce in the beginning that we have the right to refuse to answer any question, but go on.
I guess too late, but IPTV, right? I mean, we have deployed fiber. It was the golden goose, right? Back then, great idea for us to transition to where we are today. But from an IPTV perspective, there's thoughts from the engineering point of view, if fiber is the way to go, or if we need to develop a parallel infrastructure for IP, if you will.
Well, the first thing to comment is we launched our IPTV product in 2015.
Yep.
So we're excited about that. And we see the opportunity with that to also be having a simplifying effect on the network. Because managing the linear QAM the way we do in the Fios world is very complex, very challenging, and in some cases inefficient use of bandwidth and technology. So we see efficiencies coming forward. The challenge is still going to be the content model, the challenge of the cost of content and what we have to do for the paying of content and the distribution to our customers. That model needs to get disruptive as IPTV moves forward, and that will lead to more efficiencies for our customers.
Great. Tom?
Oh, one more.
Oh, sorry. One more, Lisa.
Yep.
In your network transformation,
In our network transformation,
where is class 5 switching going versus IMS for voice over IP?
where are the classified switching going versus IMS for VoIP?
So, class 5 switching is going the way of the dinosaur as fast as we can. So as I said, the total movement to IP has been happening, is happening, and will happen on a logical path. And so we're going to certainly be supportive of the industry movement there because it brings enhancements in efficiencies and simplification to the network. But right now, our primary focus is on the shift off of copper to fiber. And the IP aspect and the elimination of TDM, it will come as it comes. So that's not the primary focus.
All right. Time to draw.
Okay,
All right.
thank you so much. They will be available